Very good evening to you, our esteemed viewer. We are grateful that you are watching Church Uganda Family TV in this particular moment. It is Family Hour, and this is our Thursday edition. Edrine Mukalazi is my name. Today we are discussing something which is interesting, intriguing. I mean, when you start to talk about women in leadership, that is a topic that raises very many questions out there. But here we are to get answers to some of these questions, and we are delighted to have Dana with us. It's a pleasure having you today. And we are excited.
About what exactly?
We are excited. We are excited.
Good evening, viewers. It's always a pleasure to be here. And good evening, Edrine.
Good evening. The reason I'm excited is because we are talking about women. And we are looking at the controversies on women in leadership. Of course, there are a lot of controversies, like we can put it. But maybe, what are some of the common arguments, especially that accrued onto women in leadership?
I think women leadership has been a long time coming.
Okay.
And I think depending on which side of the divide you ride on, it can be difficult. But some of the biggest controversies is that women are never meant to lead. They are supposed to be at home, looking after man and children, and taking care of a home and building a home. And so a woman should never be in a space of leadership. If she should be in a space of leadership, the argument is that she should lead over women and over children. Now that's a very biblical argument that some people advance in the aspect coming from where Paul tells Timothy that he does not permit women to have headship over a man and rulership over a man. And so some people take that to the extreme, such that they can't even stand women in the positions of leadership as maybe managers and definitely CEOs. And so you will find that a lot of these biblical arguments, there's culture. Culture is the hardest because it's come over years. Yeah, it has come over years, and you see a lot of culture saying women should not be in leadership positions. Women should sit at home and build a home and make a family. So what happens if you're not married? What happens if you never go down the route of marriage? So does that mean that you sit somewhere at home doing what exactly? So it's a very difficult argument. I think you have seen the movement of feminism over the years. Yes. Before it was adulterated by quite a number of things, but the movement for free women, equal rights, equal opportunities, feminism that has risen up, women movement, women empowerment movements to try and demystify or give a different viewpoint regarding how women should be in leadership. That culture, biblical foundation, and then also I think because women have been marginalized over the years, and I know the argument these days is the boy child also matters, but in this specific regard, it's strange that despite all the efforts, only 10% of women lead Fortune 500 companies. Only 10% of women are in the top leadership of Fortune 500 companies. Now, that means in the corporate space, that the margin of leadership, women who have a seat at the table, is really small as compared to many places. You'll mostly find women in the informal sector leading businesses in Uganda, selling tomatoes in the markets. That's where you're going to find women. Or perhaps in garden, and even in garden, it's not commercial farming. Commercial farming, you're going to find a very, very few women. And so the informal sector has embraced a lot of women, but that's because it seems like a role and a divide for women to be in a particular sector. But in regard to leadership, I think that marginalization of women, especially in the corporate sector, in the places that women should have a seat at the table, has been lacking because people think women are weak. People think women are extremely emotional and therefore should not be at the point of leadership. And of course, there's that mindset that men have that women should never be on top of them, should not earn more than them, should not have headship over them, and all that stems again from how they were brought up, culture, and the biblical basis.
Okay, you talked about the emancipation. Of course, we've seen very many drives of feminism. But the question now here is: can these campaigns be a solution to some of these arguments?
They have been a very big help in terms of raising women to leadership. I mean, if you never had a lot of the women empowerment movements, you'd never have women leading organizations in the CSO space or the NGO space. Because what women did is, if they could not find space in the corporate, they carved out a niche for themselves. So you'll find a lot of women-led organizations because of the empowerment movement. You'll find a lot of women, you've seen banks like Think and many others who give loans to women so that they can be women-led businesses. You have movements that encourage financing for only women-led businesses. And so you have grants that are specific. When grant organizations are looking for particular organizations to fund, they're going to look for women-led organizations. And so because of that, a lot of women have tapped into it. And so they lead CSOs, they lead also civil society organizations, they lead non-governmental organizations, international non-governmental organizations. You've had a lot of women rise to the board level because of those women empowerment movements. And it's done a big job in the last century. In the last century, it has done to move people, and mostly women, into the corporate workspace. Long ago, what you'd have is parents would only would not allow girls to study, and when they did, they studied up to S2, S3, enough to make you a wife, enough to make you be able to sew and to do these things, and then they married you off because they thought it was a waste of their school fees. And you've had a lot of these organizations advocate for education of a child. Government of Uganda in the 1995 Constitution and before did an empowerment process where they agreed to give 1.5 to every girl that makes it to S6 in order to give them that point ahead of the boys as they came to the university level. You saw a lot of courses increase, particularly law. I mean, when I did law school, we were, I think it was 70 to 30% of boys in class. Girls were more or less 70, boys were less 30. Yeah. And you would find that it's because of the 1.5 that we were given. A lot of the courses, engineering courses, which was dominantly male. You have even IT, which was dominantly male. You have ladies stepping up into these particular places because of that level of empowerment. And so the empowerment didn't just stop at movements. For some countries, such as Uganda, it infiltrated the laws and the policies. And so admission into the highest level of education meant that people were not, majority of people were not dropping out in the senior secondary level, P7 level. It doesn't stop the fact and the statistics that show that we still have a huge gap, especially with teenage pregnancies. And that's the problem with women. We're very disadvantaged at that level, that we are the ones who get pregnant. You're not the ones who are going to get pregnant. It's easy for a boy to get a girl pregnant and continue with her studies. But you see, for a girl, this takes almost a year of her life. Yeah. So you have 9 months to carry, you have 3 months to nurse the baby if you have 3 months. Now 3 months we're saying because if you're working it's 3 months, but this is a teenage girl. So I can guarantee you that the damage to her body is much more than a woman who was probably built for it in her 20s. And so you have diseases that come because of those early pregnancies, those teen pregnancies. Her school life is interrupted. She now has a dependent, she has a child, she has somebody to look after. Her mindset her body may have been asking her for to sleep with somebody, but her mindset was not ready to be a parent. And so it's a child taking care of a child, and it's difficult at that moment for her to continue with education. And yet we have had what I love about some of the movements is, especially after COVID, I noticed that one of the reverend's wives and the bishop's wives had gone back to their communities and decided to start schools for girls who got pregnant during the COVID season. And they said, we're going to concentrate, this is going to be our niche, we're going to concentrate on them so that we give them a second chance to get it right, give them a second chance at education. Because the beauty about education, and whether you argue for it Western or not, is that it has the ability to open up your mind and give you more opportunities. And so when the movements came along, one of the things they pushed for is education of a a girl child. Education, and that education helped because it pushed people to higher levels. People are not dropping out at secondary school to become teenage mothers, to become wives, to start businesses when they could have been midwives, they could have been women in the corporate space, they could have been CEOs, they could have been anything that could have allowed them, that could have given them a step ahead of somebody else. And so it's interesting that the movements in the last century have, what they have done is increase the women in, first of all, the higher education level, but also increase them in the space, in the market space. And now we are turning to the discussion. We have increased them, they have increased their education level. We have increased them in the market space. How then do we get them into leadership positions? And this has been the discussion for the last 10 years, because we are saying, yes, we have brought women from 0.0 to maybe 0.5 out of 10. Some people say it's lower. I'm just picking a number out of a hat. Then the next question for women is, how do we move you into leadership positions? Because there's an advantage of having a woman in a leadership position. It's more than just an equality discussion. It's a discussion about the benefits that women bring when they're at the top leadership positions.
Okay, talking about the marginalization and the stereotypes and biases that surround women in education, in leadership, is there a way this marginalization affects their performance when they get there in the places of leadership?
It's very interesting because marginalization is really about looking down at women, not allowing them to benefit the same equal opportunities as the gentlemen are benefiting from. Does it affect? I think what really affects women's performance is upbringing, because it has a lot to do with who you become. It shapes your value system, it shapes how you look at yourself, and usually your upbringing has a bit of culture involved, especially in the African setting. Now, with the African setting where culture is involved, you'll find in a home they treat girls differently from boys. They treat them differently in how they approach things, how they allow certain things. And yes, it's true, girls are very vulnerable because, again, you're the one more likely to get pregnant. You're the one more likely to suffer the burden in case anything goes wrong. You're the one who was most likely to get abused. You're the one who's most likely to be left, in case there's an attack. It's you going to be left. You are weaker in terms of strength, while men may sometimes easily fend off an attacker. Women are not necessarily going to fend them off. And so because of that natural makeup of a woman, it's difficult. So their upbringing determines their value system. And if you see that in homes they prefer gentlemen over women, they give more opportunity to the boys than they give the girls, there is a mindset it creates on the inside of you that I'm less. And when you begin to think that you're less than the boy, it affects you when you go up in society, because you will find that when you enter into the workspace, you'll be very combative with male bosses. You'll be very combative with authority because you're trying to assert something that you did not get. There is a mindset that needs to cure. There is a particular wounding on the inside of you that needs to cure. And so it affects your upbringing, your value system, and how your initial treatment came from your father, the male figures around your life, will affect you, because in the end, you'll give that response to male bosses. You'll give that response to male colleagues at work, because that area was not dealt with. And so all those things play a part in the way both women and men are shaped in how they come up in the market space, and even as a leader. And so it goes back to culture, it goes back to upbringing, it goes back to value system, it goes back to these things that are needed in your formative years that affect you, that affect your leadership at the end.
Okay, we look at women being disrespected, if I can put it like that. And out there, people think that women sometimes go emotional because they have to prove a point that I am your leader. But anyway, what are some of the consequences that come by this disrespect to women in leadership?
That's very interesting. So, women are naturally emotional beings. our makeup from men is different. I'm not saying men are not emotional, but we're naturally emotional beings. It comes down to the makeup of our hormones. There are some parts of the month going to be difficult for us that you're not going to go through. That's the reality of life. That there are some parts that will be difficult. That does not give you leeway to wear your emotions on the sleeve. What it does for you as a woman is you learn to train yourself in the market space and in the workspace. You train yourself to curb your emotions. And this is a training that every mother should give their daughter. This is a training mentors should give girls. And interestingly, it's also a training that fathers should help their daughters with. Because you need to learn to know when to express certain emotions. And that's what you call emotional intelligence at the end of the day. You know that as I go up into the market space, people's value systems differ from mine because they grew up in a different space, they grew up in a different home. Things are different when you're in the market space. While I want to be myself in the market space, no one's going to understand that. I need to respect people's boundaries, they need to respect my boundaries. And because of that, as a woman, the first thing that you train, and I hope that our later movement is really discussing, is how do you curb your emotions? How do you deal with them? I'm not saying don't have them. I'm not saying don't express them. What I'm saying is control them. Learn to control them. I'll give you an example. I think a bit earlier in my career, when I did not know yet how to control my emotions, the thing about women is one thing leads to another. I think you've seen the clip where it says women's brains, one thing connects to the other, the fridge is connected to the car is connected. While a man just has boxes in his head, he compartmentalizes things better than women. Now, when you don't compartmentalize, which is a skill that doesn't come easy to us as women, it becomes difficult for you. Because when you take in as a woman, your natural inclination as a woman is always to take in. And you stew on things, breed over them, and then you reproduce how you have processed them. And so earlier on, I remember taking on a lot of negativity from the workspace, such that when my emotions were heightened at a certain point, I remember just getting up from my desk and walking on the road. I just walked and walked and walked and walked. After some time, I didn't have my bag, I didn't have anything. I just said I need to clear my mind. And I walked out of work, and my mind was churning with things. This is not working, that is not working, this person's not doing this person doesn't like me, the other person doesn't like me, I'm suffering because of them. And honestly, nothing specific had happened. I think perhaps the most I had received was an email that I did not like, but I'd compounded things over time and made one simple thing a million things. Yeah. And so that's the difficulty you have as a woman, the inability to compartmentalize. And it's a skill that we have to learn and people have to train us into. Such that when you get into the workspace, we are not joking around as if it's a playground. How I treat my friends cannot be how I treat my work people. It can't be how I treat my work colleagues. It can't be how I sit in positions of leadership. And so sometimes people find me in different hats, wearing different hats, and I will move from one hat into the next position. And so here I'm a very focused person and I am asking very serious questions. Here I'm probably sanguine and playing and laughing. There I'm looking for something else. And sometimes people get very confused because they've met one person. But when they see the leader seated in that position of leadership and beginning to articulate issues, have discussion of issues, demanding certain things, it becomes very confusing because they're expecting another side of you. So what happens for women is that in essence, we are taught, and if your home space doesn't teach you that, if your mentors don't teach you that, the workspace will box it into you that you need to manage your emotions. It's true, there are certain things that come that affect us as women and we need to deal with them. And so as we grow into the workspace, we learn to manage our emotions. But how do you deal with the disrespect as a woman? It depends, I guess, on what's coming. The bottom line is never accept disrespect. Never accept disrespect. Now, disrespect happens because of the way somebody interprets your boundaries. If I communicate my boundaries, you're not supposed to cross them. The danger with many of us, especially the women, is that we never communicate our boundaries. We don't communicate our boundaries in the workspace. We don't communicate our boundaries in relationships. We don't communicate because we assume that you will understand or that it's common knowledge. Men, on the other hand, learn, always breach boundaries, regardless of what you tell them.
Even when you communicate.
Even when you no, men. Let me tell you, the natural disposition of man is to push boundaries. They are always pushing boundaries, and that's why you have a lot of women who are abused, who are having a hard time, because the person you trusted, you communicated the boundary, but thinks that they have every right to do what they want with you, and that's a difficulty that we face as women. And so the kind of disrespect in the marketplace, because we're speaking about the marketplace, differs. Let me deal with my boundaries in terms of relationships between a man and a woman. I've been at a workspace and had, I don't know if I can say this on TV, I've had myself tapped on my behind, right? And I turned and I read them the riot act, and gave them a piece of my mind because I didn't expect that. I thought, we may be casual as workmates, but you don't reserve the right to do that to me. And I think because it was a Christian workspace, it was very difficult. It was very difficult for me. And so you read them the riot act. And they never did it again, but they did their best to try and fall into line. I've had more dire situations than that. I've been locked in cars that I should not have been in. You know, someone's giving you a ride and decides, because I've given you a ride often, this last bit of the ride, they are locked in cars and someone's expressing their feelings. Who said they were mutual? And so it's difficult, and it's really difficult as a young girl, because if you've been locked in cars, let me tell you, man, Jesus. If I say everything on TV, I think we'll sleep here and we'll need a counselor right after. But those boundaries as a young girl are very difficult to communicate. It's difficult when it comes from a boss. It's from a boss who is higher up, because you also think about, am I going to lose my job or not? From a colleague who is your peer, you can read them the riot act, you can shout at them, you can do all those things, but you know that there won't be a repercussion. Of course, from a junior, that's when you just fire. But but in essence, even with seniors, what I learned to do, especially when I saw the crossing of a line, is I maintained calling you by your title to create the distance between me and you. I called you by a title. 2, I kept doors open. 3, I told like a close person at work or someone outside work to just have an accountability, just so you're not caught. And that doesn't mean I've not had my fair share of being caught in really horrible situations. I have. But I said this to women: communicate those boundaries. Don't leave them unspoken. Re-establish them when they are broken. Report when things happen. When you feel uncomfortable, I hope that your workplace has mechanisms to deal with them. Report. When something is way out of line, report. Because the natural thing that women do is leave the workspace. And sometimes a bit too late. And that abuse of power that men use needs to be checked. And I think that both in the organizations and systems where people belong to, there has to be a mechanism, especially when you have associations for those different professional groups. The leaders should be thinking critically about having those reporting mechanisms. But you say it can't happen when a woman's not at the top. Should be thinking critically about those reporting mechanisms because they matter. The other aspect of disrespect from work is for women a lot is stealing their work and their credit. And you'll find that males do it a lot to women. She does the work, she does the donkey work, and he takes the credit for it. Women need to learn to speak up. That level of disrespect is really about you speaking up. Now, the reason they can do that to you is because they know you will do nothing. but you need to show them that you can do something. And so when you come to that space, especially in a boardroom or something, speak up. Say what you think, but do it respectfully too. Disrespect and disrespect will never help. So do it respectfully enough to speak up. Speak up when it's you that has done the work. Give a contribution. When someone keeps asserting over your voice or says something, you reassert, as I was saying, or as I mentioned earlier. Those are tactics that you get into the workspace as a woman. Is become assertive. Train yourself. If you don't have it naturally as a person, go to coaches who will train you in how to do it. There's a difference, of course, between being aggressive and assertive. I didn't know that when I was growing up. I really didn't know. When someone told me you're very assertive, I became aggressive. And you have to learn the difference.
Yeah.
And what you need to teach yourself as a woman, especially in the marketplace, is become assertive. Become assertive. Your viewpoint matters. It's not about how the tone of your voice, it's not about raising your voice and raising the tone of your voice. It's about being assertive in how you make your point, in how you deliver work. I think for me, those are the two aspects I can speak about when I speak about disrespect.
Wow, it is really emotional somehow, especially with such experiences. But I mean, these are common things that we see in places of work. Each time a new lady comes in, the men start. And the coordinator talks. Well, let's take a short commercial break. When we return, we are going to see what institutions that are not led by women miss out. Stick with us.